therapy by definition is going to be artificial, right? It's going to be like a little bit fake. Obviously it's my profession, but it's a little bit fake. We are providing a service to you that you're paying for. But yes, in group, the other guys don't have that agenda.
Today we have Marc Azoulay, a psychotherapist and the founder of Men's Therapy Online.
He specializes in professional men's groups that help guys move past isolation and handle complex emotions like anger to build a more authentic, connected life.
Women say they want honesty, but they don't often know what they're asking for because a raw masculine emotion is really scary. We can bring up shit that happened like years ago that we're still holding on to, compare them to like other women in our past, and none of that is bad in a men's group. Because all of us have that shit. The most honest we are is often when we're angry.
Well, yeah, and then it's like when the iceberg cracks.
Yeah, and because of our conditioning, we have learned to express ourselves the most directly, honestly, clearly when we're in that angry state. If you're with other guys that know that about men, they're not afraid of that. They actually lean in and they're curious about what is really going on.
When you listen to the manosphere about this, they talk about how women are lying in what they want, and that's not what it is. They just want it effectively.
When the kid's like on the jungle gym, the female partner is on the ground, making sure the kid doesn't fall. And the male partner is on the playground even higher, trying to challenge the kid to climb higher or get on the monkey bars, do something new. And you need both. But those are two different versions of love. But if you get that perfect level of challenge, you're like, oh man, I've actually experienced masculine love.
Hey, Marc, man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, happy to be on here.
So I kind of want to jump right in a little bit. I'm excited to talk to you about the anger issues, the nice guy problem, but explicitly in how your work differs from mine in those groups. Can you tell folks about why that perspective from you is going to be so valid and your experience with it?
Sure. Yeah, I know I'm kind of like coming on as a men's group expert here. And we run a ton of men's groups at Men's Therapy Online. We have like 8 ongoing right now. And I think group, especially led by a therapist, is critical. Yeah, and I want to differentiate that between like a peer-led men's group versus a therapist-led men's group. We can go into that in more detail because I'm sure you have some opinions about that too. But basically, a therapist-led men's group, a therapist can help facilitate these kind of difficult conversations around anger, around shame, around disappointment, which is what we're going to be getting into on this episode. And what I love about group is that it's honest. When you're doing individual work, and you're just sitting there talking to your therapist, or if you are a therapist, hearing from your client, you only get one perspective, and of course, it's going to be twisted through that person's experience, right? Whether they are always the good guy, or maybe they're always the victim, or maybe, they're always like trying their best, they don't understand something. Whatever their narrative is, often from their childhood, is what's going to weave into every session. There's no way to avoid that. But in a group, you get to like watch the kids play in the playground in a more objective way. You get to see how that client, or how you, if you're a client, how you really interact with other people, right? Without that filter, without that kind of those white lies that we tell ourselves. It's way more real because it's undeniable, right? There's so many more eyes on the situation.
Yeah, and every now and then, right, you get that client that pushes back a little bit of like, I'm paying you, I can't trust how much you like me. And I think with a group that goes away to a certain extent, like everybody's paying to be there, but everybody but one person sitting in that room doesn't have to like you.
Yes, exactly. And I said it to clients, it's like therapy by definition is going to be artificial, right? It's going to be like a little bit fake because there is a relationship, or there's a paid relationship there, right? Like we are trained to use techniques and skill on you, right? The better therapist, which I know you are, I am, like it feels natural, like we're able to integrate it into our way of being, but like we're using our education and our knowledge, right? It's not like a completely authentic interaction, right? We are doing a thing. We are providing a service to you that you're paying for. But yes, in group, the other guys don't have that agenda. They're there to get as most out of it for themselves as possible. So you get more of this conflict. You get more rough edges because it's not as safe. It's one step towards the real world, right? It's still a little bit artificial because it's still a service and it's still led by a leader, but it's a good midpoint between, the safe container of individual therapy and then just the dangerous reality of real world.
I think men's groups are powerful, wonderful things. In fact, almost every patient I graduate now or like discharge, I really encourage them to go start one after therapy, get together with 2 buddies, keep having these conversations. But what I like when I refer to your groups is I know there's a guardrail in that room for people who are really struggling. Mm-hmm. And there's that distinction between like, I'm a guy that's I'm looking for community. I'm looking to be like a better guy where I am. And then there's somebody who's like, I need to heal. Like I'm hurt and I need to heal and I need some space to do that. And that's been my experience with referring to you over the years. How long have you been doing groups now? Is it like 15 years?
Yeah, about 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And you still look like you're 22. So thanks for that.
Nice. The mustache didn't even do anything. It didn't age me up. Still look like a child.
So, so 15 years in. And now you're also training other facilitators. Like how many guys you got working for you?
Yeah. So we have 6 now, about to hire 2 more. They run the men's groups as well for us.
And I like that you've gotten to the point where you're making mini-me's, right? Like that's the goal. If you get good at something, you want to make more people doing it because there's plenty of work to go around.
I think every man should be in a men's group. And we have that, and we have our Slack community, which is like basically online group light. So really the goal is like just get guys connected with other dudes that are all doing this work, right? So much of us are alone. We're so isolated. We feel like we're like the villain of planet Earth, right? The most messed up person on the world. But you get in a group and you're like, oh, wow, okay, I'm not alone. And my issues probably actually aren't that serious. And people have overcome them, you know? And here's a group of guys that want me to get better. And like, I don't know, if you're listening and you've ever like played sports, right? Or been involved in any kind of like a great project team at work or something, like you know what that feels like. Imagine having that for your life. You know, for like the stuff that actually matters.
Well, and I just think that like guys are more drawn to some structure in our connection. I think it's starting to turn where people are getting less shitty about it, about the idea of men bonding side to side versus face to face. We need a little structure, and it goes a long way. It doesn't just choosing to be somewhere as somebody who's talking about something goes a long way. And then if you're in real pain, doing it with someone who knows how to help you heal is fundamentally changing.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, again, I mean, the pendulum just moves back and forth, but it's weird that it's taboo to say that like men want to compartmentalize stuff. And that's not a bad thing, right? Like we work in boxes. We work with straight lines. That's how the male brain works, right? Compared to the female brain, which is a lot more amorphous, a lot better at multitasking, right? A lot more holistic, right? The traditional male mind is like, we're pretty cut and dry. The way I look at it, it's like a gym for your emotions, you know, especially if you're a dude that struggles with it. So for instance, for me, right, I'm good at emotions. From my upbringing, but I struggle with fitness. So like when I joined a CrossFit gym, that was the game changer for my fitness because it's, you know, an hour every day. It's with the same people. There's a coach, you know, pushing me to do things that I would never freaking do by myself ever, right? There's accountability. And like you mentioned, there's guardrails. Like I'm not going to hurt myself because someone's going to be there to spot me if I, you know, want to throw my back out or something. So, you know, you can think a group is like the same way, right? It's like you're creating a compartment, you're creating a box to commit yourself to do something that is probably a little bit difficult or a little bit outside of your comfort zone. But you have a therapist there, you have other people that are all committed to the same mission, and you're moving towards a goal together. And like I said, that's a really special and a really powerful feeling to have.
It's the one thing I kind of miss about internship is that I just can't do groups, right? I love the individual work, right? I love helping somebody pick apart their life and put it back together. But I miss seeing that. I miss seeing it happen in a room. So the kind of pivoting off of that, right? You've seen guys deal with anger in about every way that we exhibit it. How does that nice guy narrative, you know, that like shame and anger cycle, what does that look like in front of a group of guys working on it versus an individual patient?
You know, I'm sure we talked about nice guy a lot, so I won't go through kind of the definition, right? But, you know, for those maybe listening for the first time, it's like people pleasers. So often what happens is we have a nice guy that joins the group and he's really gung-ho about it. You know, from group theory, there's different stages of group. The first stage is called pseudo community, right? Fake community. And if you've been in a group of people, you've felt this, right? It's like you join the group and like day one, you're like, these are my people. This is my soulmates. I finally feel like I joined. Where have you been my whole life? It's just like it's like a high, right? It's like the honeymoon phase. The nice guys try to keep that fake community, that pseudo community alive as long as possible. So they will join day one and they're going to be crying day one. They're going to be as open as, you know, it's not real, right? But they're going to be like open and vulnerable. They're going to be like connecting really hard. They're going to be wanting to plan, you know, times to hang out outside a group. They're going to be just like oversharing, right? They're like so gung-ho. They want to be like the best group member. You know, when someone's talking about their divorce or their pain or their depression or whatever it is, right? That person is like there and they're listening and they're attentive and they're saying all the right things because they've like been to therapy for 4 years and now they're like ready to share. And I'm saying it tongue in cheek, like this stuff isn't bad. Like it's good to want to be a good person, but you lose the parts that make group powerful and the parts that make life real, specifically conflict, right? Like when you're trying to be the perfect person, right? It was the nice guy thing. We're trying to be the golden child. You're ignoring that one group member, you know, Jerry over there that like kind of talks a little bit too much and kind of pisses you off, right? Or you're ignoring Steven who's like jumping to conclusions about your story and just kind of pretend, you know, acting like you're him and that you're the same person, you've gone through everything together, right? Or maybe there's that one group member that's actually been there a while, but you don't understand why he's still in the group because he seems like kind of an asshole. He's like kind of like calling people out, and you're like, hey, why are you calling people out? Like I thought everyone's supposed to be friends in here, you know? You start ignoring all that stuff as a nice guy, and what happens is that it starts to become like an overpromise, underdeliver, where the nice guy's trying to put out so much, but they're ignoring those moments of conflict. And they end up kind of collapsing. Either they collapse in group with, you know, a big anger outburst, which is common for a lot of nice guys, or they just disappear and leave, right? There's some conflict that they don't know how to address, so they just kind of ghost the group. And it's my job as a facilitator to notice those patterns and coax it out, right? Because whatever's happening in their relationships, right, in their marriage, in their family, in their friendships, at some point it's going to happen in the group. Because we're just talking about how people relate with other people. You could pretend like therapy group is different, but ultimately it's just a bunch of people in a room talking. So, you know, those same patterns are going to manifest. And it's about, you know, again, our work as therapists to really pinpoint them and catch them before they become destructive. Or if they do, hopefully the person doesn't leave and you can then pick up the pieces afterwards and help them really dissect what happened there.
Well, and that's, I think, one of those big separations between like a men's group and a therapy group is there's more accountability for being there. And it makes it harder to keep that pattern going where you come in, you give it your everything, and, you know, good for being the guy that puts it all out there to the extent that you know how. And then the embarrassment of the explosion and having that held by a group of guys, I think is got to be really powerful. Like what happens when that guy stays after something like that?
Yeah. I mean, that's what, you know, when I'm still in groups now, but one of the things in the first groups I was a part of that really sold me on it because I had this pattern, right? Like I'm the guy that will show up, be great, kick ass, and then just build resentment because everyone's failing me or disappointing me or not good enough or whatever the thing is, and then blow up. And what my group leader told me was like, because I told him that, you know, thought I was being a good, you know, therapy client. I was very aware of my patterns. I told him that, and he was like, okay, well then you got to show up the next week. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, like you have to keep showing up, right? Like what's the next chapter of that story? Because everywhere else in my life, I would have these big blow-ups. I would push people away, and then I'd never talk to them again. And, you know, I would like protect myself, set a boundary, whatever, I justified it, but I would actually never really resolve the conflict. You know, I would let the conflict get too high to the point where it wasn't even workable at that point, right? It was just so overwhelming. The only thing I could do was just push everybody away with explosive anger. So with group, it's like, yeah, now you got to show up for like day one, right? After D-Day, right? You have to show up for like the next day and deal with the repercussions of that. You know, deal with what people think about that explosion. Deal with, you know, people's feelings that you may have hurt, you know? But also, if you can go through that, you can actually resolve the issue. And that was something that I never, for me as a client, never really had experienced until I was in group of like, oh, these problems are actually solvable as long as I can like talk about them and be honest, you know, courageously honest, then they are solvable. But if I'm just keeping everything to myself and just like building up these narratives and being pissed and resentful at everybody, then of course they're never going to get resolved, right? Because it's not relational, right? I'm not engaging the other person. I'm just doing it all in my head, right? It's just an echo chamber.
Yeah, the thing that's running through my head as you talk about it, I did an episode about my anger and shame cycle and what it lost for me. And what I hear from my guys that go to the groups, the experience changes in that the people in the group aren't as afraid of your anger. You know, when you're in front of a woman, you're out in the world, and particularly if you're a bigger guy and you have that blow up, you've scared people. And that's a very different experience and kind of cascades even more shame on top of it that we use to contain it. And I imagine being in a room full of guys that have had anger, have had explosions occasionally, right? Have done it wrong, but also aren't worried about you punching them in the face. Like all of a sudden there's room to process it without that extra layer of shame of having scared a partner, scared a kid, scared a neighbor.
Yes, totally. There's this whole thing around in our world therapy, right? That like anger is a secondary emotion. And I mostly agree with that like maybe there's like hurt or something underneath it. But I think as men, the most honest we are is often when we're angry, and because of our conditioning, we have learned to express ourselves the most directly, honestly, clearly when we're in that angry state. So I think if you're with other guys that know that about men, like you said, they're not afraid of that. We're actually like listening. Like when you get heated, there's like, oh shit, okay, this guy's got something to say. Like they actually lean in and they're curious about like what is really going on. And, I've seen it happen, for me personally, it's happened in tons of the groups that I've facilitated where like when somebody gets pissed and they say something, there's always someone in the group that's like, oh my God, thank God. I'm so happy you finally said it. Like
Yeah.
everyone knows you hate Jerry. At least you're talking about it and now we can deal with the situation. Right. But we were just waiting for you to say it. And like, I'm sorry, it took you 3 months of the group to get it out there. But like, we're here. We're not afraid of the explosion. We're just happy that you're being honest finally. Like, welcome to the group. I mean, that's also a thing is like, typically after that first explosion, there's this thing in my groups where it's formed people. It's like, okay, welcome. Like now you're actually in the group. Like now you've stopped being a fake group member and you're actually in the real group. This is what group is actually about. You've gone through that initiation and now you're one of us.
What I see happen in individual work, and I imagine it's even more functional around a bunch of guys, is that it helps them find the volume knob. So rather than just being completely closed and not saying a boundary, not saying what's pissing you off, and then popping off in a really ineffective, explodey way. Once you're comfortable with someone to hold that space with you, it's a lot easier to figure out a 7, 6, 5, 4, and figure out when, like, what volume to start at with who. Because that's the other thing that I don't like that a lot of clinicians talk about is they talk about these scaling boundaries, but they don't acknowledge the cultural differences. Like you got to start a lot more direct in New York than you do Idaho. And you've got to start a lot softer when you're talking to a group of women versus a group of men. And neither, like it's not wrong or right. It's just one of those things of how it is. And we need to stop putting a value judgment on it.
Well, and that's why to kind of riff off that, like I think men's groups, specifically all men, right? No women. And I work with, just so your listeners, like I work with almost entirely heterosexual dudes. There's tons of great, more queer programs that I can refer you to, but like I'm going to talk about heterosexual dudes during this. So guys that are in a relationship with women, right? And like what we talk about in our group is like giving the group the shitty first draft, because male emotions, especially if you're a nice guy, which means you don't have a lot of experience expressing them, right? Are really brutal and super mean, right? And like women, they say they want honesty, but they don't often know what they're asking for, especially for a guy that hasn't expressed his emotions, because a raw masculine emotion is really scary. And we can often say things that are violent, right? That are aggressive, physically violent, right? We can say things that, about hatred. We can, if we've never expressed it, we can bring up shit that happened like years ago that we're still holding on to that feels like an ambush to our female partners, right? We can like, compare them to like other women in our past. And if we haven't worked on our misogyny, can come across as like extremely belittling, right? And none of that is bad in a men's group because all of us have that shit. So like if you talk about that shitty first draft, you really like practice it in the group, give us that brutality. We know what that's like. We know what male aggression is like. We know what male sexuality is like. We know what male pain is like. We know how competitive we can be. We know how like objective we can be, right? Because like a lot of guys, we're like, well, just being honest, I'm telling you the objective truth, but there's no empathy. We're not thinking about how someone might hear that objective truth. It's very cold, right? We can feel very cold in our emotions. So give all that to your group. And then the group and the therapist can help you like massage that into like a more female friendly way and be like, okay, you said like 15 things. Really, you probably want to bring up 1, 2, maybe 3 of them with your partner on this. Don't give her the tidal wave. Like we can filter through and sift through and be like, okay, what you're really saying is X, Y, and Z, right? And so you can actually resolve the conflict effectively instead of just, scaring, intimidating your partner.
Yeah, we had on a great clinician to talk about women working with men in the therapy room, and that came up around how women send their partners to therapy because they like, I want to hear your experience. I want you to talk to me. And I think the trick there is guys need a training wheels environment to do this because it's hard and a lot of us haven't done it. And it goes a lot better in contained spaces with people that understand it, like you're talking about, whether that's with a therapist in front of you or the group, because otherwise you just keep doing the same cycle with your partner, which is I pop off, I dump the tidal wave of 15 things, It's a big fight. I scared her. I feel like crap. I just shut down and shame myself out of trying to need those for a while until it comes up again. And I think when you listen to the manosphere about this, they talk about how women are lying in what they want. And that's not what it is. They just want it effectively. They want it connected. And I would say they want it culturally competent for who you're talking to. You can talk to your dudes like in a very different way than you talk to women, than you talk to a queer friend. Like, it's just the way it is.
It takes like that extra mental and emotional load when you're a dude and you don't have that men's group that you can give them the raw experience, because you then have to, to mask, right? You have to like, be like, okay, here's what I'm feeling. Here's how I would think about it. Here's how I would talk about it. Okay, now I need to go through a filter to see how I'm going to talk to my wife about it. Okay, am I saying too much? Am I saying not a lot? Is it going to come back to bite me in the ass? Like, there's so much of these like filters that we have to go through. And when you're like emotionally tilted, you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, that's a very cognitively demanding thing. So kind of to the point, it's like having a place where you can be authentic. And then to your wife, you're talking about authentic stuff, but it does come through a softening filter or a more compassionate filter, a holistic filter, whatever you want to think of. Because yeah, like I think women want the truth, but I think it takes a woman who's done a ton of their own work to be able to do their own translation on their end, right? Of the male mind. An example that I think about this comes up in our groups a lot is when a guy is, struggling in his relationship, he'll often pull up the spreadsheet, is what we call it, right? And he'll go pros and cons about being in a relationship, right? It's like, I don't like that we fight, but I really like her butt. Like we have some kids, so I want to stay, but like also she kind of keeps the temperature too hot. Like we'll just go through it objectively in our mind, try to like categorize. And that is so demeaning to our female partners. They hate that. But that's how the male mind works, is that we want to take a quantitative method to what is a relational issue. So you can talk about that with your dudes, but when you go to talk to your wife, like don't run her through the spreadsheet. Don't give her a score, But that's how most dudes work. That's how our minds like conceptualize how we make decisions.
I think the hardest thing with the way that works out for guys is convincing them that when they're doing that, they're angry. And I think what it is for us, at least what I've come to over the years, is when we start making the spreadsheet, it's because we're trying to use our cognition to channel the anger and keep it contained. That's why taking that list ends up popping off so often with a partner, because one, you're right, it's absolutely belittling. No one wants to be like a pros cons list to anybody. But then two, when it escalates, you're angrier than you think you are. And so when she's hurt, when she's upset at you for that, you're a lot closer to popping off or just shutting down and getting really mean. Like that's the other one. It's not like the other thing is the explosion of the nice guy is not always this huge man tantrum. Sometimes it's just brutal, cutting, emotional attack.
Yeah, it can be cut her down at the knees by like bringing up all of her insecurities. Another common one, and we can dive into these in more detail if you want, is like being totally cold. You're right. Like you said, having that cognitive override and being like, okay, I'm angry. I don't know how to talk about it. I'm going to default to the minimum viable product of being in a relationship. I'm going to, I'm not doing anything wrong, right? I'm going to do my chores. I'm going to keep going to work. I'm going to keep paying for stuff, but I'm going to have zero emotion. I'm not going to give her anything. I see that probably as the most common. It's like the complete disconnection and withdrawal because we don't know how to have a progressive, moving forward conversation. And we don't know how to say the thing that often is rooted in our insecurity. And we're trying to convince ourselves, top down that it's not a big deal or, there's other things we need to worry about, or we're trying to talk ourselves off a ledge because, like you said, we're aware of that volcano and we're trying to contain that volcano, right? We're trying to make sure we don't Hulk out. But that coldness actually creates more damage in the long run than having the Hulk out moment.
Well, yeah. And then it's like when the iceberg cracks, the more stuffed the guy is when it finally does go, the more negative impact it's likely to have. And I imagine in the group setting with that, where you've got a clinician, we're trained on how to help you hold that. But then just looking around at a bunch of guys where they're like, oh yeah, man, I see you. This is what I did about that to not be an asshole anymore. Do you want to try it?
Yeah.
I think there's something about sitting across from another guy and he's like, yeah, I've been that kind of asshole. Do you want to do something different?
Exactly. Yeah, are you ready to change, or you want to keep telling the same story?
We can keep letting you bitch about this, or you could just be less of an asshole. Which one do you want?
Yes. Yes. And I think that is, again, I think that in male spaces that we do well that women don't quite understand is we do go to solutions. We jump to solutions and we go to advice, and we are very cognitive. So if you could have another dude convince you that you're being a dick. And and not only that you're being a dick, but that you're being ineffective. Like you're not going to get what you want by doing that. Then we can change actually pretty quickly. But it has to come from that baseline of respect and accountability. You know, it's not to belittle someone. It's not to alpha you or whatever, right? But to be like, hey, I've been here. I did that for 20 years. Like, if you do it for 10, you've beat me. So you're ready to beat me? And a lot of guys, for better or for worse, we don't have a lot of capacity to have the same person complain about the same shit forever. That's a lot of us struggle in a relationship with women, right? We feel like we're stuck in these loops and nothing's changing, right? There's more nuance, but that's the feeling. But in a men's group, if someone's coming in for a few months saying the same shit, someone's going to be like, oh my God, like just quit your job, right? Or just tell your wife this thing. Like, I literally cannot hear you talk about the same shit over and over again. Like, it's so annoying and boring. And like, that's good. That's a good correction that I think a lot of men need. It helps us get moving.
Well, and it's that deciding to be there. So it kind of forces the conflict at some point where I think what I see a lot of guys that are stuck in that pattern where they feel really trapped and they come into individual therapy and for 6 months, I'm hearing the same story every week. The same thing happens in their friendships. And usually like somewhere between 3 and 6 months, I start to run out of patience for it as a clinician. And then I just tell them that like, hey, we've been here. Like, I don't know if I'm doing you any good, man, but nothing's moving on this. And I imagine that the people in your life are kind of tired of hearing about it. If I'm tired of it and paid to be here, like, how's that going? Like, how many people have you lost just because you won't move one way or the other on this? And what I love hearing from the guys that do it in group is it goes faster. Like, it's because somebody's going to get annoyed and check it a lot faster than a paid clinician who's like grounded and patient.
Yeah, someone's gonna be like, just dump her, you know, or whatever it is. But
dump her or get over it. Like, I don't care which, but like whatever you want to do, man. Well, and I think that's worth talking about too, because a lot of these conversations, when we talk about going to groups, we talk about what it's like in the initial phases, right? That like you're showing up like a good guy, you're trying to lean in, and eventually you put down the bullshit and fully join, and then the work really starts to move. When do you see guys make that transition from the guy that's there now fully to the guy that's a little bit senior and along the way and mentoring the other guys? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think you're kind of alluding to it. It's like when they start to make meaningful change and they've proven into themselves like group works. You know, maybe I think it does take like someone higher up in the hierarchy. I think men, again, our brains are hierarchical. So it either takes the leader doing something or a more senior group member being like, okay, you ready to make that change? And once they do it and they get the accolades from the group, they get the, pat on the back, then they're like, oh man, I could do this, and I think a lot of men, one quote that I bring up a lot is from a Boys and Man. I'm sure you talked about it 100 times on this show. They study like male and female parents at the playground, right? And they see that like, I think it's like something like 88%, it's like some crazy percentage when they were just observing, right? The female partner, when the kid's like on the jungle gym, right? The female partner is on the ground, right? Making sure the kid doesn't fall, right? The hands up, watching the kid, okay, be safe, I'm here if you fall, right? And the male partner is on the playground even higher, trying to challenge the kid to climb higher or get on the monkey bars, do something new that they've never done before. And you need both, right? But those are two different versions of love. So I think when you first receive masculine love, which is somebody giving you the right amount of challenge, is another way that I look at it, right? The perfect level of challenge, which is an art form. Once you receive that, right? And I guess to that point, like, if it's too challenging, you're not going to do it because it's impossible, right? And you're like, oh, this person is just like wants to humble me. And if it's too easy, even if you do it, you're not going to feel accomplished because you're like, oh, this was not that hard. I just kind of half-assed it. So find that right level is like, it's quite hard. But if you get that from somebody, you're like, oh man, I've actually experienced masculine love. And maybe you didn't have that. A lot of guys that end up in our rooms like didn't have that, right? Their fathers were deficient in some way or another, right? They didn't give them that. Maybe they didn't have a dad. Maybe their children tired of divorce. Maybe there was addiction in their home, whatever it was, right? Like they didn't get that masculine love. So when you get that, you're like, oh, wow, someone sees me. They've challenged me at an appropriate level. I've met that challenge. I've gained some respect from this person because I've overcome that challenge. I can't wait to do that for somebody else, right? To be a mentor, right? To be a leader, to be a guide, to like all get better together. And inevitably in a group of guys, there's going to be some guy in there in the hierarchy that you are better at or more skilled at. in relationships or finance or fitness or substance abuse, whatever it is. There's something you're going to be good at, and there's something you're going to be shit at. So it's like finding somebody who can help you that's better, and then helping people that you are better than, right? And not from a place of control or domination, but of actually wanting to elevate the whole collective, right?
Yeah,
if everyone's
service.
helping everybody, then everybody elevates. And it becomes like a fighter squadron, right? Like everybody's in it together to try to create the best lives possible. And that is, like I said, it's a really, really powerful thing.
Well, and I think that's where it solidifies things for people too. Like you can't get mastery at anything without teaching it at some point is kind of a common thing. And then I think there's always this moment in time where guy comes in, guy's in pain, has been in pain for however long he's been before he showed up. And usually it's a lifetime. And then we deal with it, right? We change their reality so it's not just based around this kind of traumatic response around whatever it is. It doesn't seem like it becomes real for guys until they help somebody else that they see themselves in.
Yeah. I mean, I would just dig a little deeper and say, like, until they feel like they're valued, right? Until they provide value. Like it makes me think I had a group member, this is years ago at this point, but he was a bodybuilder, right? So he was like a competitive bodybuilder. So super fitness dude, right? But struggled with a lot of other stuff. He struggled with substance use, right? He struggled with his relationships. He couldn't keep his marriage together. He had a tough relationship with his children. He struggled in a lot of stuff. And there was a lot of guys who end up in therapy, nice guys who, are actually pretty good emotionally, but maybe struggle with fitness and discipline. And this guy, this bodybuilder dude, felt like he was the low man on the totem pole. He was like, man, I can't do any of this stuff. I can't have relationships with women. I get angry. I can't get my drinking under control. I got all these issues. But it wasn't until he got valued for his bodybuilding, until he like literally made a training and diet program for one of the other members who their issue was that they were overweight and insecure about that he felt like he belonged.
Yeah.
And to kind of, I guess, move forward on that kind of thing, talk about levels of group, right? The final level of group is community, true community. And true community is actually about diversity. It's about everybody having their own roles, everybody having their own foibles, their own imperfections, but coming together as a community and trying to make shit happen. So when this guy felt that he had a role, that he could talk about fitness and diet and being in shape and losing weight in what was an emotions group, he felt like he finally belonged. That he was finally a valuable member of the squad that we're building. And he's been in group for like 5 or 6 years since that. I mean, he's in because now it's his group, right? It's not a group he's attending, it's his group. It's a part of him and he's a part of it.
Yeah, and he found a home in it. I think that community aspect is probably one of my biggest annoyances with a lot of the men's self-help pace. And I'm sure you feel very similarly about it. The idea that the successful man is an island, the idea that a safe life is an isolated life. And it's pretty typical, right? All my traumatized veterans I work with, when they first start, they're like, man, I just want to go live in the woods where no one can bother me. And they do. Like, that's an honest thing. After World War I, there were entire communities of veterans that's exactly what they did, is they literally broke away from society, went off into the woods, and never came out again. That's not a life worth living. And it's not how we're designed to be at all. I imagine there aren't many of those guys that show up for a group, but I'm sure you get a few of them. How does that narrative come out in group and what happens to it?
Yeah, there's definitely a few of them. I mean, it's interesting. So I'm going to tell me this. So I'm Jewish, right? Which is a very like tribal communal culture. So I never quite had that, or more interesting, like when I got that diagnosis or when I got that dose of that masculinity, I was like, oh, this is really different, because when I think of that thing, I think of like Catholic culture, I think of Irish, I think of Scottish, I think of English. Like it's like these kind of like European roots where it's like about being that island, and like not needing help means that you're strong as possible because no one, you don't need help, right? Like you're just a statue that's like solid. So you're of course strong. It's kind of like, I mean, the word is stoic, but as a student of history, it's actually very different than real stoicism, right? But it's like what modern culture has called stoicism, is like just being like solid, rock solid. But in Jewish culture, that's just not the case. Like we are unbelievably communal. Jews help Jews everywhere. We are like a tribe. To the point where people think we're like a mafia or Illuminati, right? And like I'm proud of that because we help each other out and we prioritize each other. So we've always been this tribal community. So to your point, the guys that come there that see that, like you can see that they often, if they're a nice guy, they want to help everybody else because it's a way that they're kind of alphaing them, right? They're like, oh, I don't need help, but you need help from me, right? And it's this false belief that like, if you accept help, you are below them on the hierarchy, but if you give help, you're above them. And guys, especially if they've done some level of therapeutic work, and certainly the therapist in the room, you can feel that. You can feel that like, okay, this person's helping me, but really they're kind of alpha dogging me, right? They're helping me, but they're actually dominating me. They're actually bragging. They're actually trying to puff up their own ego. They're actually trying to like reinforce their own sense of self. There's like this dirtiness to it. Yeah. And over time that becomes really, really apparent. And you find that people stop asking you for help because they know that they're paying this secret tax, right? They're getting help from you, but they're losing your respect.
And you're not meeting them with any vulnerability. So why would they be vulnerable with you? Like that, I was that guy in my first few men's groups that I went to. I had a really hard time showing up as a licensed therapist in a room full of people talking about feelings and things and not falling back on expertise to feel safe. And it was just trash behavior, right? Like you can't show up like a therapist anywhere but a therapy room and have it not be trash behavior. And what is interesting to me when I talk to guys going through it on the other side of it, it's all because they're really afraid of some kind of intimacy. Like if I show them where I am incompetent, I will be hurt, or I will be abandoned, or I won't be respected.
Well, and it's, again, like the power of group, another metaphor used a lot is like a circle of mirrors, is like turning that on that other person, right? Because if you're afraid of all that, it's because you do that to other people, right? And what humans do, which is normal, right, is like we think that everybody thinks and acts and believes like we do because we only have one experience. So if you're charging people that resentment tax or that respect tax, or, you know, if you feel like they owe you something because, you know, you've helped them, like you're going to think that it's the other way around. And I think that's where men's groups, especially men's groups that are courageous, that can call that stuff out. It often starts with that, of being like, oh shit, like I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to owe somebody something. That means everybody that I help, I expect things from them, right? Yeah. I think that they owe me things, and I feel powerful when I feel like people owe me things, when I feel like I'm the gatekeeper, right, where I control everything and I can call in all these favors because I've helped all these people. Like that's also trash behavior, man. Like you're not like a mafia boss. You're not the Godfather trying to like collect favors or use people as leverage. Figuring out like what you do to other people often highlights your own insecurities, and then you can work through that and try what is called in therapy a corrective experience, right? You can try something different, and more importantly, feel something different and start to rewire your brain to be like, oh, this person's helping me not because they want to feel better than me, or not because they are superior to me, but because they like actually care, because they actually, you know, are invested in me, because they actually want to see me succeed and there's no strings attached. Holy shit, right? I've never had that. My parents were not like that. My friends were not like that. I'm not like that. But this person, I trust this person. This person might be like that. And that opens up a whole new realm of life, right? Of relationships, of connecting, of possibility.
Well, and it's so subtle from the outside, right? When it's not a bunch of people very deeply exploring it, there isn't much of a difference from being the guy that's useful, that's in service and in community, than the guy who's showing up and doing things and expecting things. You're still showing up, you're still doing things, you're still useful. People are reticent to connect with you because there's something in our hindbrain that feels that.
You know, we talked about shame a lot, but the other side of shame is grandiosity. And I see that with this pattern. Grandiosity is the big thing, right? So like, say you're going to, I don't know, a church cookout or something, right? And you're that helpful dude, and you're doing everything for everybody. You're moving the chairs. You brought 2 dishes instead of 1, right? You helped the old lady up the stairs. Right, you're doing this thing, and then you come back and you're done with that event, and you're like, these people suck. I'm better than them. I don't belong. I'm just being helpful. I'm like contributing, but I'm better. This is not the group for me. But I'm gonna keep doing it because I'm a nice guy or because it's the right thing to do. There's again that cognitive override we're talking about. But the emotions are actually pretty clear. It often becomes this feeling of distance and superiority. Versus like what you said, if you do the other way, if you're actually contributing and you are part of the community rather than just like serving the community, you feel like you belong, right? You're not tallying up all the things you've done. It's just what you're doing, right? You feel like, you know, because the event was successful, you feel like you have some ownership of that event being successful, and you feel proud of yourself and of the community as a whole. You feel like you have a place. you're not leaving with that sense of grandiosity. Don't think you're better than them because you help them. You're just a part of them. There's no better, there's no worse. It's just one organism. It's one unit working towards a shared goal. All that stuff breaks down because you feel like you belong. But that takes a level of vulnerability, and probably a better word for guys is trust, right? It takes a level of trust that you are a part of something and that there isn't any secret agenda or there isn't any backstabbery, there isn't any, other layer, and that you can actually relax into it and lean on it.
The idea that's come through my mind as you talk about that is you need to respect the community over the members. And so if you're part of a community that is doing something and you can feel proud of what your community is doing, you don't have to like everybody there. Everybody there doesn't have to be your friend. Everybody there doesn't have to share every value you have. We can say this community is doing this. I'm really proud to be part of this community. And I think that's the trick, especially with younger guys now, because there's this expectation. The internet has made so many small pockets that we feel like we should be able to walk into a room and have 20 people that all feel like us, which just doesn't really exist.
Well, I think the internet, I think Manosphere does that. I think I think therapy does that. I think men's work does that, where it's like, okay, to be a part of this community, you have to all think, believe, act, and speak the same way. You have to have the same political values. You have to have the same tools in the toolbox. You have to have the same, respect the same prime principles. But that's not community. That's fascism, truly. Like, that is making everybody think, believe, act, dress, appear, speak the same way. That is fascism, right? That is like complete control. And most men push off to that. Or the nice guys try to conform and then, break off at some point. But like I said, real community is like everybody's different. And I really didn't experience this. And again, I'm like a top 1% therapy user. I haven't experienced this in the therapy realm. I've only experienced this in the past 3 years since I moved to a small town in Colorado. And I'm actually dealing with real shit. Because like I'm saying, therapy is a little bit fake. It's a great training wheels. And obviously it's my profession. I'm for it, but it's a little bit fake. It wasn't until I was actually having to interact with my neighbors and deal with things like trees falling down on our road, right? Or someone losing their dog. Or we have a meal train system. If an older person goes through surgery or somebody has a baby, like we just had a child, right? There's meal trains where you just bring food to people's house. Like just real like survival need stuff. I have neighbors that I don't like, right? They're like kind of annoying, but I still help them. I have neighbors that I don't know, that I literally have never spoken to. I still help them, and vice versa, right? There are people that help me. There's people that have brought food to my home that I've never even met, right? Because it's about the community. It's like, okay, we all know, at the very least, we know that it's hard to live in the mountains. We know that we need each other, and we're committing to these greater sense of mission, of survival. And we might not like each other, we might not even know each other, but we're working towards something better that we can at least all agree upon that we all need to some extent. And that's cool. Yeah. And I think, again, I think without some level of survival pressure or like, maybe you can speak to military service, like, or even a company where there's like a really cool product or really something that someone ever believes in, without that like banner to fight under or to really kind of come together under, it's all a little bit fake. Right? Because the stakes are not quite there. I think you need real stakes to have real community.
Yeah, I think it has to have real outcome. When it's survival stuff like that, you going off to be mountain man, Marc, like that's real in those communities, right? Because nobody else, there's no Grubhub for y'all.
We got no DoorDash, man.
Like nothing. So like if there needs to be food, you can't just like I couldn't send you a DoorDash card, right? And I think that's true. I think that makes it easier to see and lean into. I think for those of us in urban environments, that's why volunteering tends to make people so happy, because there is an outcome when we go, right? Like if I go stock shelves, I don't have to agree with the like ultra Christian person next to me that's helping feed homeless people. I can just say we're both on the same page of like feeding people is a good idea.
Yeah, or like if you're part of a community garden, right? Like the person whose plot is next to you might talk your ear off and be super annoying, but you can at least like agree that like you want to grow some carrots and you can talk about carrots and you can like improve your neighborhood.
I think this is where a lot of guys struggle in that isolation, is that they want community to be friends. And what's interesting is you don't really get friends until you have some community, or you just get codependency. And I think that's another thing that doesn't get talked about quite enough about guys and codependent friendships, where they just kind of hold up with the same one or two guys and don't expand their needs, their social circles. And that adds to that isolation as well. But I can't remember who said it. I think it was Amanda Earl, where she was like, a community, you don't have to like everybody. Like you won't like everybody in a community.
You won't. that's more accurate. Yeah, it's like literally impossible too if it's a real community. Yeah.
Yeah, if there's 10 people in a room, you're going to dislike one of them. Just off a basic ape shit. Like,
Yes. That's what it means to be a human. Yeah. Well, and if you think of like a village, right? Like a true community, again, it's like you have your family, which hopefully you like them, right? You have your friends, hopefully you like them. But then there's like other families in the village. There's other friend groups. There's like, the blacksmithing group. There's a stablemans. There's the gardeners, right? There's like these like many, many different layers of groups to form a real community, right? They're called subgroups in the group therapy world, right? Like there's so many subgroups that bring the diversity into what is the greater community. And it's like, you can work on liking your subgroups, having friends and connection, all that stuff, but you belong. The sense of belonging only happens at the community level. And again, the village is getting attacked by barbarians. It doesn't matter if you don't like that other family. You're all working
we're all running
together.
or fighting. Let's go.
You're all on the same team, right? Like the stakes get high enough, it creates that connection.
Well, and I think the other thing I noticed too is all the guys come in the nice guy kind of modality are doing it generally around their dating life, right? And what I think always goes well is when I get them into a community, they still have to practice boundaries within community, but it's a lot lower stakes. Like you don't have to walk away liking that person or being liked. You just have to walk away from that person knowing that they stack the shelf, like, or whatever it is. And I think a lot of guys really shame building that ramp to those emotional skills where like you need some low stakes stuff. You need some space to try it out. And it's okay that you mess it up, but that doesn't make it okay to never fix it.
Yeah, just because you're going to mess it up. I mean, like the superpower that, again, try to import to my dudes is like being good at being bad at stuff. Like you're gonna be bad at stuff, especially if it's new. But it's about that perseverance, about that discipline, about that accountability, being able to move through it. Like you're guaranteed to fail the first couple times you try something, but it doesn't mean that you are a failure, right? Back to that shame piece. It doesn't mean that like you're better than them, back to the grandiosity piece, right? It just means you need to like iterate, learn, and grow. Like God forbid you have to learn something, right? Like you're trying to build a skill, you're trying to develop life mastery, and it doesn't just come to you, right? No one's entitled to that. You have to learn it, you have to practice it, you have to fail, get back up, iterate, make changes, try something new, right? That's the process of learning. And I think that is for me, my prime value that I want to, engage these dudes with is like learning is fun and learning is what it means to be alive. But it means that you're going to have some ups and downs. It's not going to be, if you're winning all the time, it's not challenging enough, right? It's too easy. Like you're just patronizing yourself.
And if you're losing all the time, you need some support. That's not a way to do anything.
Right. You should make it easier so you start winning and then you can work your way back up to the harder challenge.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited. We've got a guy coming on and we're going to talk about an entire episode of the window of tolerance, like goal setting around how to figure that out for yourself in different aspects of life. And I think that's the other thing I imagine that goes pretty well in groups is all the guys in there that have been there for a minute have figured out a window of tolerance that they can share and give some examples to guys about how it works. And that's got to be really healing.
Yeah. And seeing someone coming up being like, oh yeah, I remember when telling my wife no was hard, right? Now it's easy. And now I'm working on whatever level 10 skill, right? But like level 3 skill, tell my wife no, I can actually give that to this other guy. I can help him learn that skill and then we can move up from there.
I like having your groups to refer to. I've been looking forward to this conversation around groups. And it's really validating to hear you talk about it with what I see through the patients that I've sent you. Right? It's always nice when you talk to somebody and you see the work come through and how they talk about it. Love that you're here. But I also want to be respectful of your time, man. I know you got that baby waiting on you.
True. She lives here now.
100%.
Can't get rid of her.
She's home now.
Yeah.
It's happening. You got your little bean. So I want to move into giving a little bit more of your own story, right? In that same way that the groups do, we want to normalize different guys' stories. And so for you, what's a truth you learned about masculinity before you were 12 that's remained true through your life?
I think a truth that I learned that remained true is that kind of hierarchical piece. I think as a kid, I did not benefit from that. I was like bullied. I avoided masculine only spaces, right? I avoided sports. I avoided things like fitness. I did good at school, but that was mixed gender. I avoided like Boy Scouts, right? Anything where it was only dudes. I was too insecure and, didn't have that kind of support at home where I felt like if I wasn't at the top or if I wasn't even in the scrum, it wasn't worth it, right? I was, to my point earlier, I was really bad at being bad at stuff. So I would just give up and I would get either shameful or grandiose or often a combination of the two. And it was that hierarchy was very, very scary to me. But I think that is the truth about masculinity, is that we are hierarchical. But to your point, with enough support and with enough humility, which is something that I really lacked as a kid, I was never taught that. I think that's like a very difficult thing to really integrate. I never got to experience real male belonging. You know, I mentioned CrossFit before, but it really wasn't until getting on that journey, frankly, that is very hierarchical, right? Like there are still moves. There's a lot of moves that I can't do. I can't do a bar muscle up, right? Like I can't, like all this Olympic lifting shit's fucking hard, but like I have a place, right? I am on the bottom half of a lot of the men that go there, but for the first time in my life, especially in a very male thing, right? Like lifting weights, super male, like I feel like I belong. And I feel like I'm respected. I'm moving up. Yeah, I see the progression. I'm helping guys that are just starting, right? That again are on level 1 weights. I'm on level 3, right? So I'm like helping them begin. You know, I can contribute other things, like I can cook when people have the meal trains. I can, you know, I can offer emotional support when guys are going through shit. Like I have my place. I have my connections. There's other people I don't like in there, right? It's a community. But like I finally felt that I'm part of a hierarchy. And even though, like I said, I'm in the bottom half of it, I still feel like I belong and that I'm respected. And having those two things together I had never experienced that before. I always thought that if I was at the bottom of the hierarchy, I would not be respected and I would ultimately choose not to belong at that point.
Yeah, it was weird for me in that, because I think our experiences, I stayed away from a lot of masculine things too, for very similar reasons. And what's been really wonderful about middle age is I have a place now where I'm kind of at the top of the pack, right? Like being a professor, having that status, doing this, which makes it a lot easier to show up to a gym and be like, yeah, I suck. Like,
right.
Help. Like, how make do body don't work like it did at 20. What are we doing?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, because like our ideas are more diverse, you know, more resilient.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why so many young guys struggle with that, is that transition from recognizing like, oh, I want something to feel like I'm contributing so I can accept, and then finding the healthy way to do that. I love that, dude, so many guys start that conversation with the things their father taught them well, as opposed to the thing that like you were on the other end of and that still stayed true, but you figured it out.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't change. I just changed, but the truth is still the same. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. Well, so I've been kind of curious about this one for you. What's a time where pursuit of manhood hurt you?
So, you know, that was my like drug addiction years for sure. You know, so coming off that kind of, you know, not fitting in, being like overweight, not feeling confident, whatever, right? I went to college and I was like, okay, I'm going to reinvent myself. And I'm going to reinvent myself into what like an 18-year-old thinks is cool, which is like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So I started doing every drug under the, like whatever I could get, right? I tried to get as laid as much as possible, right? I tried to party as much as possible. I tried to be like the coolest guy that I could think of. I was still kind of a loser, right? Because I didn't have any integrity, but like, at least I was like getting high and getting laid, right? But like the thing that hurt me was the inability, again, lack of humility, to say I was scared or to say no. So even though I thought I was top of the world and I was like doing all this cocaine and shit, like really it was because I was too afraid to say no. Because underneath it, I was still this like Jewish nerd Dungeons and Dragons kid. I just totally suppressed all of that to become this fake, you know, hyper masculine version. So I got in a lot of situations that were too hard, right? Situations with women, situations, party situations, legal situations, right? Like interacting with criminal element of Pittsburgh, right? To buy all these drugs and to be involved with them that were like way too scary, right? That like fucked me up internally and I had to go to therapy about it. But like, I just could not say no. So even though, again, I convinced myself, I deluded myself into thinking that I was brave for doing this, I was ultimately a coward for that because I wasn't strong enough to say no to some of these things. I was still being controlled by my insecurity. It was just like the other side of it. And I think that was a lot of that masculine, like, you know, kind of like being an island, but more about like kind of puffing my chest or trying to prove something or trying to like feel like I have everything under control, right? Being hyper competent at everything, pursuing excellence. And I just went way too far out of my depth in a few arenas.
I don't know a guy who somewhere in their teens and 20s didn't overdo some of that like like some aspect of that masculine. I'm just really impressed that you tried to do them all at once. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, all at the same time. It just burnt out fucking hard. Yeah, I just flamed out real hard.
I'm going to do all of this and it's going to make me feel better. Why do I still feel like shit?
Yes. And it was all driven by self-hatred, which is why I never felt better, because that self-hatred never went anywhere, right? I looked different. I acted different. I was having a very different life, but I still hated myself ultimately.
You were still in there. Well, I guess that kind of leads into how you got out of there, right? What's a time when manhood empowered you?
I think what empowered me, so two people come to mind. So one was my first male therapist, Jeff Beyer, who I saw in college. And then the second was my current therapist and mentor, Rick Tivers in Chicago, where it was really the first time that I got like emotional connection with an older man. I think Jeff, when I saw him, was in his late 50s. Rick is in his 60s. And I needed an older dude. I needed like a dad to like not just guide me through, but actually ultimately respect and like me. You know, maybe it goes back to that hierarchy thing now that I'm saying it out loud, but like feeling proud to be a man and feeling that there was an older man, there was like a boomer man that like I could look up to and be like, yeah, like you're doing it. And I want to say like, I love my dad and I look up to my dad and my dad is my hero in many ways. The emotional thing he doesn't quite have because he's an immigrant. So he has a lot of the masculine presentation. And I love him for that. And I want to take a lot of that from him. But when it comes to that emotional kind of, you know, you think of the like the fireside chats, right? Or like you go fishing and you get the talk about what it means to be a man and what life is all about. And these kind of like transmissions of wisdom. Like once I got those and I kind of tapped into this deeper lineage of masculinity, and these are both guys who have had their own men's work and they, you know, came up very differently. But I felt this like lineage and this like real, yeah, wisdom, I guess, like almost like, you know, getting a legend from an elder or something, right? Like feeling like you really got something that has been passed down to other men before you and was passed down to them. And that now I try to pass down to the people I work with. Like that made me really proud to be a man and being like, oh, there is something here. There is a greater, almost ancestral line that, we can find. You know, I think it's rarer these days to find it. I think, like I said, a lot of guys are islands and either don't pass it down or don't look for it. But there is like a really deep root that you can tap into. And it feels pretty good to feel like you're part of that.
Yeah, man, I'm immediately thinking of the importance of representation and how, while like, yeah, guys are privileged, white guys are privileged, there's all kinds of problems. And we've been overrepresented in a lot of spaces. There aren't many spaces for guys to see a complete person doing well. And I think we lost that when we lost a lot of the service organizations, but I get exactly what you mean. Like I love my father. He was great. He taught me a lot. And it took like meeting 3 or 4 really functional older men that respected me enough to tell me how I was screwing up and that I cared enough about when I doing well when they told me I did good, that it felt good.
Well, because as a young dude, I think a lot of young dudes do this. We just shit on the older generation. We're like, oh, they're incompetent. They've fucked everything up. They've ruined the economy. They ruined the environment, right? I mean, I was like a liberal, like hippie, like, you know, revolutionary anarchist dude, right? Like I hated fucking boomers, but like to finally, yeah, again, meet someone that that respected me, that we could actually connect and be proud of being a man. That was big, because a lot of my hatred of the older generation was, again, also hatred of myself and hatred of my manhood and hatred of a lot of, you know, the world in a lot of ways. So once that hatred could melt a little bit, I was actually open to real connection.
And then found healthy channels for those parts that you were afraid of. Well, man, I feel like I know you a little better now, which is I kind of like a lot, especially since we've known each other for years and had some conversations. This was awesome, man. Thank you for showing up with that. It means the world.
Yeah, I loved it. It was an awesome episode.
Well, so if guys are looking for you or they're looking for a group or guidance from you, where do they go?
Yeah, so all of our stuff is at menstherapy.online. So we have like an unbelievable amount of free content. So we have like tons of podcasts been running forever. We have a million blogs. We have a free Slack channel, which is like a chat room that you can join and talk with other dudes. We have about 250 guys on that channel right now. We have a free book club. We have free courses. We have all kinds of free shit, right? So like go there. There's something for you. And then if you want to work with us, right, if you want face-to-face, we're going to charge you for that, right? That's individual, couples, and group. But there's a way that you can plug in and get help right away. So if you feel inspired by this conversation, check out menstherapy.online. You'll find everything that you need right there. We're here. We're ready. You just got to click the button.
Well, thanks, Marc.
Thank you.
That's our conversation with Marc. As always, our researcher has some notes for me to clarify. We talked about anger being a secondary emotion, and it often is. Anger can mask shame, fear, or hurt, but not all anger is defensive. Some of it's primary, a direct signal that a boundary was crossed or something unjust happened. As Marc said, effective therapy helps someone learn the difference, gives them space to explore the anger, and express it skillfully instead of suppressing or exploding with it. I also mentioned that after World War I, entire communities of veterans went into the woods and never came out. That was an overstatement, and that's on me. One of my favorite parts of doing the show is finding where my thinking falls short and sharing the corrections with you guys. In this case, I was drawing from individual accounts and fictional portrayals of veterans withdrawing into isolation, but when our researcher looked into the broader historical context, it simply wasn't there. There's no solid documentation of a widespread, organized movement of veterans forming separate communities in the forest. Many veterans did struggle with what they called shell shock back in the day. Some of them withdrew socially for years. The broader point stands. Trauma can drive isolation, but I overstated the history and needed to correct that. As comes up a lot on this show, we talked about masculinity tending to organize around hierarchies. That pattern shows up consistently, but what earns status varies widely by culture and context. Men tend to be highly attuned to status, whether through biology, socialization, or both, and culture largely determine what climbs the ladder. Our work is helping men recognize the ladders in front of them and choosing which ones are worth climbing. And finally, on teaching and mastery. While I found teaching to be critical in my own development and the development of my students, when a researcher looked at the broader literature, it's clear that teaching is not a requirement for mastery. The core drivers of expertise are deliberate practice and high-quality feedback. Teaching can strengthen those elements, but it isn't the same thing as them. The best teachers are those that are still learning. Thanks for listening to the whole thing and letting us get that clarity in. I'm glad people are here for it. Next week, we're going to be discussing male fragility and its impact on dating. I hope to see you there. This is Tim Winnicky with American Masculinity, wishing you the very best of weeks and thanking you for being the guy that's trying to be better. Take care.